man buys a parrot only to have it constantly insult him. He tries everything to make the parrot stop, but nothing works. Frustrated, the man puts the parrot in the freezer. After a few minutes, the insults stop. The man thinks he might have killed the parrot, so he opens the freezer and takes the parrot out. The parrot is shivering. It stammers, "Sorry for being rude. Please forgive me." Then after a moment, the parrot spoke softly. "What exactly did the turkey do?" Now we open up with something to kind of, shake things up. Please stand for the reading of the word, for those of you who are able to stand. We are going to be reading Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1, for those who will be following along, those who will have their phone or their iPads. Colossians chapter 1, verses 11 through 20. Colossians. Give it a few more moments. I saw that one. I was trying to choose between a couple of jokes, but I'm like, you know what? That turkey one. Yes, it gave him an example of what could happen. Colossians chapter 1, verses 11 through 20. I will go ahead and read. "Being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and from him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body of the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross." This morning I will be lifting up the scriptures. Being strengthened, verses 11 through 14. "Being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins." Praise God. May I be seated? Thanks be to God. Yes. So, this is chapter 1, and this is about the town and church of Colossus. And this is a letter that Paul is writing in response to what's going on to the Colossians that day. And when the Colossians first started their church, I can imagine that they were on fire. They received Jesus Christ. They had the hope of the high calling. They were grateful that, they were saved. They were reconciled back to God through Jesus, for the shedding of Jesus Christ's blood. I can imagine that they were excited and sharing. And of course, we know that many of the churches that were attributed to Paul, though they were small, they began to grow and become established. However, I imagine that through time and through the years, that some old habits came back, some old thinking. Also, too, there were other teachers with other traditions that came by and tried to influence the Colossians. And how they were thinking, kind of swaying them away from Paul's focused teaching about Jesus Christ. So, Paul wrote this letter in response to saying, you're trying to marry some other things together. You're picking up old habits, you're picking up old things, and you're trying to make that the church, and the church began to fall apart and have inside fighting and all of those other things. So it reminded me of the regular church today. Many anyway, is 200 years old. Am I correct? I am sure when it first started that there were people that were excited and they were committed to building a church, and they were 200 years. You had to be committed. Committed to building a church, committed to affecting the community, committed. We have the property ended here in Columbus, but it didn't start right here. It was other places and other structures. So this one was built. And I can imagine that through all of that, they were building the community. But through that time, as we know, we're here right now, that a lot of changes have happened. A lot of events have happened. A lot of circumstances have occurred. Some have come, some have gone, some have passed on to the heavenlies. And so we've shifted. We've shifted. The title of the message is A Grateful Heart. And so I wanted to talk about the grateful heart because it's the gratefulness that shields us from the bitterness. It shields us from, it's maintaining the gratefulness in the midst of not understanding the whys and wheres and all the things that can kind of get into it. We are now ending the end of 2019. And the reality of church is that every one of us have experienced a lot of life in between. When we first came to Christ and where we are today. We've experienced a lot of change and transition between the hopeful beginning of this year till now. I know at the beginning of the year, I'm all about excited. I'm excited about that new exercise plan that I'm going to keep this year. I'm excited about that new diet. I'm excited about being healthy. I'm excited about, okay, I'm going to keep a journal, which I always start and don't finish. I'm excited about, and I'm sure you fill in the blank for yourself. Each year comes its own expectations and excitements. But by the end of the year, do we still have that steam? No, we've got to encourage ourselves up. That's what Colossians was going through too. A wise mentor of mine challenged me to think about this. Out of all the stuff that you've been through this year and all the stuff that you've had occur to you, what if everything you have not thanked God for this year, not even today, was taken away by tomorrow? How many things could you think of that you need to be thankful for so you can keep it? Of course, my list would be endless because I would start being like, okay, well, I'm grateful for my hands and my feet and the ability to get up and get out of bed and that I can hug and express love, laugh, joke, access running water, eat apples, drink coffee, smell pine trees, smell the fresh air, feel sunshine, inhale fresh air to breathe, remember precious memories, hear beautiful music, learn and grow. When I wake up, I take advantage of the fact that I'm going to wake up my son and he's going to wake up too and be in his right mind and be healthy, and that the bus is going to come and pick him up for school, and I'm going to be able to put him on a bus to school, and in the school, I'm grateful that there's protection there, and that when he gets from school, he'll be able to get into aftercare. I'm grateful that I still have my living mother. I'm grateful. I would have to go through a whole list of things that I take advantage of. Things sometimes I stop thinking of because of complaining. Shoot, why do I have to get him up again? Didn't I tell him I was going to get him up? Get up already. And then the dog kind of tries to help and licks his face and she barks. I'm like, get up. And so sometimes it's 20 minutes of get up. But what if God took everything that I forgot to say thank you for? Thank you that I have a dog to help me get my son up. You know? What is going through, I don't live your life, I live my life. So what is it that we know all these other things happen, but what if in the midst of it, okay, you want this to happen, what if I give you this and took everything else away that you're forgetting about? Breath in your lungs, function in your body. The fact that you can come to church. I know you've lost that and that hurts. Where are you grateful that you had that before it left you? And I was like, that shifts perspective. So it gets me off of looking at what I'm viewing in the negative and shifts it to the positive. You understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. My car had some issues that I really needed to work on this week because it's been getting worse. But I'm grateful I still had a car in the midst of it. You see that perspective shift? So that my heart doesn't get bitter. I'm not sitting here telling Norma and then Leslie and then Butch and then Robin and then Jeanette, you know my car. You know my car, right? You know that car. I get out of ungratefulness and I get into just being, I don't know, pessimistic, negative. Forgetting that God's grace keeps waking me up. And if nothing else, I still have legs that I can use to walk. Maybe a long walk, but at least I got them. That shift into gratefulness. So, I have this friend who has a brother. And he worked really hard to get himself a new car. And the car that he got, it was a little used, but he would shine up the chrome on the outside, and he would make sure the dashboard, you know the little dust, well the dust that I have because I haven't detailed my car out in a while, that you have on the dashboard. He cleaned the windows. He made sure he replaced the radio and got bigger speakers. He just, what they call, tricked out his ride. He, just replaced hubcaps, just made it really nice. And you could tell he loved his car. And my friend and her mom would be like, hey, did you do this? Did you make sure you're doing the maintenance on the car? Oh, yeah, I got this. They would say little things because, they've driven cars, had a couple of cars by now. This was his first car. He's like, yeah, I got it. Oh, his car. He loved his car. Boom, his little his music, his Christian music. They were a part of our church, and we have such a dynamic youth and young adults ministry there that we have a lot of these Christian music that's kind of newish. So he would just boom his music, and he just really loved his car. He even drove to California and back in his car, showed it off to cousins, went to go look for a job. He was gonna march out into the world in his new car. One day, about 8 months into it, just kind of and stopped. He was devastated. He's like, what happened? His family, his mom is like, you just got that car not too long ago. It was a good car. It's used, but it's a good car. What happened? No one could find out. They didn't know what was going on. The transmission, no one knew when the car stopped and the engine was no longer any good. Brought it to a mechanic that they knew. Mechanic knew that he's like, he could see how sad and almost broken hearted this young man was over his car not working anymore. And he looked at it. He couldn't figure out what was it. So he looked under the hood. He was old school. He didn't just put the little machine on it to just try to see what was wrong. He actually listened for it and see what's going on. 3 days into it, he finally called the young man back. I just got a question to ask you. Did you ever put oil in it? Did you ever change the oil? The young man, my friend's brother, put his head down very sadly and said no. He never put oil in there. Great car, shiny, smelled really good, made sure it was fresh, but he never had any oil. Colossians chapter 1, verses 11 through 14 says, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience. Then giving joy thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share the inheritance of the holy people. I imagine the oil in the young man's car is somewhat similar. The oil in his car was meant to help the engine survive, give it endurance or patience, to withstand and push through long drives or bumpy rides. Gratefulness helps us withstand many ugly circumstances and gives us perspective, something other than the negative side of what we are viewing or experiencing. Gratitude. 200 years, I'm sure the building and other edifices that the church was a part of have withstood storms and hurricanes and warnings and floods and different church hurt and needs and anger. It has withstood so much. But amongst probably very important ingredients had to be gratefulness. Thank you for at least the opportunity to have someone else to get mad at. We could have no one here. I could have no one to bother to to wake up. That after the dust and the grogginess and the sleep comes out of his eyes, to hug me back and say, I love you, Mom. I have to shift my thinking. We have to shift our thinking. This is very simple, but I wanted that God uses the simple things to confound the wise, to show us different things. There was another little story of two twin brothers. Y'all may have heard this, just bear with me. Two twin brothers. One was overly positive or always grateful and thankful and thanked his parents every time he got something. The other one always complained. They would get a new toy between the two of them. The complainer, would talk about how the truck, if he got a toy truck, it was the wrong color. And he was disappointed. The other one would be like, oh my gosh, I didn't have a truck this color yet. Wow. Or I get another one. He was always grateful, always thankful. So the parents, they're watching the two boys. They're like, you know what? This one, I would give them some food. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's too lumpy. It's too whatever. And the other twin would say, wow, thank you. I have something to eat. So they did an experiment. And they did a few things, but this is the last one that the last thing that they did to really see if this kid, the second twin, was actually as grateful as he's coming across as he normally does. They put a pony in one room and shut the door. And they put a pile of manure from the pony in another room and shut the door. This is an old school story. So, today that would be very frowned upon. But in this story at this time, it was okay. So they put the complaining son in the room with the new pony and said, this is your new pony. And they shut the door. And they put the son that's always grateful in the other room and said, son, they didn't tell him what it was. We have something for you. And they shut the door. They gave him a minute. And now they're not like tiny, tiny kids at this time. They've kind of grown up. They're probably a little around my son's age or a little older. So they open the door with the pony, and the little boy's crying in the corner. And they're like, what's wrong? Did the pony hit you? Oh gosh, we shouldn't have done this. It kicked him. Did something happen? No. Why are you crying? I didn't want a pony. I wanted a dog. Oh. So they close the door. It's like, okay, well, They open the other door, and they see, they're like, where is he? They couldn't find the little boy almost. They're like, where did he go? Oh my goodness, he got devoured. Something was in it. We shouldn't have done this. And they're calling his name out. Other twin. I'm going to call him Other Twin. I know he had a real name. And he's like, I'm here. And he puts his hands out. They're like, what are you doing? And he was in the middle of the manure. And he said, there's so much manure here. There has to be a pony. And it just kind of flabbergasted him. He was in the middle of the manure. We can have other words come in our head. And he was still looking for the good. Sometimes it's hard. It's hard being in a room full of manure. But the gratefulness that gave him the patience to dig through it was what he needed to go and find the pony. So of course the parents switched around and gave him the pony and probably still gave the other little boy a dog, and he probably didn't like that one either. But the point is, gratefulness helps that engine, the machine of life. It gives us grace to attach ourselves to that patience, to that long suffering. That says, you know what, if I just withstand a little while longer, it's going to be all right. It is. That's why God says, do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due time you shall reap. It takes time. We have a microwave society, but those of you who have experiences on farms and ranches know that when you sow a real seed, it takes real time. I was even told a good apple tree to its full bloom doesn't take a few months. It's possibly, I didn't look this up, I believe it takes a couple of years to get a full bloom apple tree. I imagine it probably does.
About 5 years.
About 5 years. Okay, I heard that, but since I don't know that for sure, about 5 years. So when we get these seeds, sometimes we get so grateful, and it is. We should be. We should be looking for the harvest. We should be looking for the change. But remember, sometimes it's in the dark that's the change. Under dirt and manure, and little rats trying to eat at the seed. That's doubt, unbelief, criticism, insults that we give to ourselves and from others. Sometimes a little lack of sun, a little lack of watering. It happens all underground. But we are not alone. And soon God will lift us up in due time. And there will be branches and leaves and then a trunk. Then it grows. It grows. And I can imagine even the little experiments that have had to do with Joshua and growing plants, that when it first comes up, that apple tree probably isn't full grown. It probably is really small and weak. Few leaves. Looks like maybe more of a branch than it really is a trunk that comes out of the ground. But gratefulness helps us to stand the test of time. To stay underneath the dirt with the manure, which is fertilizer, used many a times to help grow things that we need later on. Gratefulness. I believe this morning God's desire is to reconnect our hearts, minds included, to our first love, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross so that we can be reconnected back to God, our Creator. And with that gratefulness, with a grateful heart, and remembering, man, we didn't have to do this. We didn't deserve it. Because while we were yet sinning, Christ died. He did it in remembrance of the generations to come. Not because it was already guaranteed that we're going to do that. So with a gratefulness, it helps the heart move through grief, past insults, snarky remarks, snobs, being misunderstood, underestimated, even feeling taken for granted. I wanted to look up also to the clinical. What does gratitude do? It improves your sleep. It makes you exercise more often. It reduces pain, lowers blood pressure, strengthens our immune system, lowers stress, activates the healing relaxation response, helps you live longer. And I believe is a special ingredient to what gives us life and helps us to really have a life worth living. And 200 years, there must have been hearts of gratitude. Let's pick their gratitude up, put it on with our clothes and the patchwork of life that we already have, like our Joseph cloak, and get back up. Get back up to love one another, support one another, handle each other in our hearts with care, handle our responsibilities here with care, as if it was the first day of a new job. It was the first time meeting a new friend in kindergarten, and we don't already have our friends, or the friends we did have, and that was enough. I don't need to. Let's reconnect, because God is good. And His mercy endureth forever. It is worth reconnecting to. He's worth, and so are you. You are worth reconnecting to and receiving gratefulness and giving gratefulness. Let us bow our heads. God, I thank you for your amazing grace. I thank you for restoring us back to health, back to life, back to your fruition, back to God through Jesus Christ. We humbly repent of anything that is disconnected, any disheartening, any fears, any foes, any stress, any grudges we're still holding on that disconnects us from the love of God and receiving love so that we can be grateful for what we do have. We're not hidden by a veil, by our wanting to control the situations around us so much so that we don't get hurt. We can't see that we can be grateful for the creation that we had nothing to do with that's going on around us and the goodness that you have in store. Restore our patience so we can run this race well. And we say thank you for allowing us to do this, for having service, being able to come together. We bless your holy name. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. Amen. The doors of the church are open.